Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering video. Today I'm going to be looking at the Grave Danger deck from the Torment set. This is another graveyard based theme deck, so it's sort of in keeping with other theme decks I've been looking at. Although you'll see with this one it's again a slightly different mechanism than some of the other ones I've explored. So this is a 60 card deck. With this particular theme deck you also get an extra foil card thrown in on top. We're just lucky we got an island for this one, as luck would have it, because the deck's actually a blue-black deck, but that one's in addition to the cards in the main deck. So let's actually have a look and see what's in this deck. Like I said, it's a blue-black deck. We've got a little bit of colour fixing on this in the form of Tainted Isle. You can tap this and add one colourless mana to your mana pool. You can also tap it to add blue or black, providing you have a swamp in play. And there's two of those in the deck. In terms of the basic mana, you have 11 swamps in this deck. So just have a quick look at the artwork there, and also 11 islands. There we go. And now we're going to move on to the deck itself. I've ordered these in sort of order of mana cost. Zoom in there. Okay. So first up we have Careful Study. This gives us card draw, 2 cards, but we discard we then discard 2 cards from our hand, as this is already starting to put cards into our graveyard. And this is a key feature of this deck. What we're actually trying to do with the deck is put cards into the graveyard which are then going to be used later on to pump certain creatures, and we'll just see as we go through what those creatures are. We've also here an obsessive research. So this one is just a card draw, there's no discard. But if we do end up discarding this card for another reason, has a madness cost on it, and we can play the card for its madness cost at the time we discard the card. And there's 2 of those. Then moving on to the 2 drops here. So this is the 2 converted mana cost cards. We've got False Memories. This actually puts the top 7 cards of your library into the graveyard, so it's basically taking cards straight from the library and putting them into the graveyard. The key thing with this is you want to be ready to do something on the turn that happens, because at the end of turn you're going to be removing 7 cards in your graveyard from the game. And there's one of those. We have Compulsion, which allows us to discard a card from our hand and then draw a card, or to sacrifice it and then just draw a card. So you can see there's a cost to cast this, but also a cost to activate the relevant ability. We've got Breakthrough. We can use this to draw 4 cards, and then we can choose X number of cards in our hand and discard the rest. Okay, so we're really choosing through the casting cost how many cards to keep. So if we haven't paid a lot for this deliberately, and we're going to end up with a lot of cards in our graveyard. Chainer's Edict. This is some removal. So target player sacrifices a creature for 1 and a black. It's also got a flashback cost on it of 5 and 2 black. So once this is in the graveyard, it can then be recast later when you have enough mana to cast that. And again, target a player and get them to sacrifice a creature. Once that's done the second time, when you flashed back, it's removed from the game. So there's 2 of those. Got Morgue Theft. We can return a target creature from the graveyard back to our hand. This also has a flashback cost on it as well. So once we've cast this ends up in the graveyard, we can flash back when we've got enough to cast it for the flashback cost. There's just one of those. Acromoeba has an ability on it where we can discard a card and get it to switch its power and toughness until end of turn. So we're sort of giving it 3 power and 1 toughness if we do that, and also getting a card into our graveyard. And there's actually 3 of those in the deck. Carefully Illusionist. So whenever this becomes the target of a spell or ability, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. So again, milling cards from your library to your graveyard. Also has an additional ability for 2 and a blue. You tap it and you can prevent all combat damage that we dealt to and dealt by a target creature. You can actually target it can target itself here and get some interesting things going on by doing that. Cephalid Vandal. This involves a thing called shred counters. So you put a shred counter on Cephalid Vandal, then put the top card of your library into the graveyard for each shred counter on Cephalid Vandal, and you do that at the beginning of your upkeep. So it's just sticking more cards into your graveyard. Crypt Keeper. You can use this to remove a target card from a graveyard from the game. So some removal there. There's a bit of removal in this deck. There's not an awful lot. Skywing Ivan. This allows you, if you're, if the plan with the deck doesn't work, you've got something here with evasion, and you can use it to basically, beat your opponent over the head with, and you can also use it to you can basically discard a card from your hand and bounce this card back into your hand in response to a threat to it. Not particularly powerful card, but there's obviously some creatures in here which you may have to use if your graveyard based plan doesn't work, and this is where Psychotog comes in, because this is your graveyard based plan. So it's 1 blue-black for Psychotog. It's a 1/2. The graveyard based ability is the bottom one, which says remove 2 cards in your graveyard from the game. Psychotog gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So the basic idea with this is you're going to at some point end up with a lot of stuff in your graveyard. You cast Psychotog, pump it using that ability, and then swing with it. Now obviously you've just got to make sure that if you're swinging to hit your opponent, that you've removed anything that can block that from the board. Also, you can discard a card from your hand and give Psychotog +1/+1 until end of turn. So you can pump it by discarding cards, but obviously that's reliant on you having a certain amount of cards in your hand. And there's 2 of those. You've also got Organ Grinder here, which is exploiting the graveyard. You tap this, remove 3 cards in the graveyard from the game, and target player loses 3 life. So you can target the player directly with this, and there's actually 4 of those. So if you've got a very full graveyard, you could get to do a lot of damage with those cards. Afflict. This is a removal for creatures, so it's going to give target creature -1/-1 until end of turn. So it's going to kill anything with 1 toughness. There aren't really any other cards that work with this, I don't believe. So that's really all you're going to use it for. It does also enable you to draw a card when you play it. And there's 2 of those. Cephalid Looter, again, drawing a card, discarding a card, so filling up your graveyard. And there's 2 of those. Cephalid Broker, target player draws 2 cards, then discards 2 cards. Same sort of principle, just more cards. So that's a 3 and a blue. Churning Eddy. Return a target creature and target land to their owner's hands. You can use it to bounce stuff back, either your own stuff or an opponent's stuff. And there's 2 of those. Mainly you play that on on yourself and your creatures if you're trying to stop something from being bolted when it's your turn or something going on. It's a sorcery, so it's only going to be able to do sorcery speed. It will be obviously much more flexible if it was an instant. Beltian Collaborator. This is another creature that you would use if your primary plan fails of using graveyard to pump creatures. This has flying. It's a 2/2 for 3 and a blue, and you can expend black mana, really as much black mana as you have, to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. So you can basically pump that up. Painbringer is removal by removing a number of cards in your graveyard from the game and then directing at a target creature -X/-X based on the number of cards you've removed. So you can use that to obviously target a creature and get it removed from the game. Keflid Aristocrat. So whenever this becomes a target of spells or abilities, put the top 2 cards of your library into the graveyard. More stuff to put it into the graveyard. And then finally we have Zombie Assassin. These last cards are at the top end of the mana curve, so 5 mana. This one's 4 and a black. Remove 2 cards in your graveyard and Zombie Assassin from the game. Destroy a target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. So basically you've got removal here at a pretty heavy cost. Costs quite a lot to play, and you've got to remove 2 cards in the graveyard and this card. Another bit of removal. So you can see here really that there's, I suppose, 4 elements to the deck. There's a certain amount of removal in the deck. There are cards which take cards and put them into the graveyard. There are cards that will then exploit the fact you have a full graveyard and pump themselves in some way, either to do direct damage or basically damage through combat, and then obviously if the creature isn't blocked, as in the case of Psychotog, and the damage goes through, then that will hit the player. And then also there's a number of creatures in here where you can just do a straight swing with them and do damage to the player that way. Now obviously with this, the big decision when you're playing this deck is when what do you want to discard and what do you want to play, and that's really the critical thing here. And that's why I think it's a good idea with this deck to really understand how much the cards cost, when is the best time to play them, when is the best time to discard certain cards, because that's really critical, and you don't want to end up sticking a card in your graveyard that would have been useful to you. Conversely, you don't want sort of cards clogging up your hand that really should be in the graveyard and allowing you to sort of pump your Psychotog. And you find that there's just so much stuff here filling the graveyard that it's not difficult to actually fill the graveyard with this deck. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.